Hey, we're here at the let's start over. Hi, we're at the Miller Room at the Museum of American Speed here, looking at Leo Goossen's area over here, and so we've got his drafting board. We've got a few of the engines he had. Walk us through some of the things about the people who aren't familiar with Leo. What did he mean to American motorsports?
Well, Leo Goossen was an engineer, and he got hooked up with Fred Offenhauser early on. Offenhauser was a great salesman.
Sorry.
But he wasn't a great engineer. So Goossen comes in and corrects some problems that the Offie Miller engines had. And it was a marriage made in heaven. And there's no other engine that's had the history that an Offie has.
Yes.
They were dominant clear up into the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
Just put more boost in them.
And the Offie was really built on the foundation of the Miller. So, because Offenhauser went to work for Miller as a machinist in the 30s, and then, or actually in the 20s, and then when the Depression came, because Miller wasn't particularly a good businessman, so he went bankrupt. Offenhauser had saved his money. He was a very traditional kind of guy, blue collar kind of guy. He saved his money, bought the machines for pennies on the dollar, and then continued it, and for a long time built Miller engines, and then eventually converted them over where they started calling them Offenhausers.
Right, and so you wind up with this trifecta, right? You've got Miller, kind of the visionary. You've got all the passion and the tinkering of Offenhauser. Then you have the propeller head come in. And, as a propeller head myself, I happen to really appreciate
and all that stuff was done on this drafting table. So this really is hallowed ground. This really is. I mean, this was his drafting table.
This is actually one of his prints
Okay.
of the Offie.
Right, and when you really think about all the process control, whittling out something once, is awesome. But you're not going to have 3/4 of the field at the Indy 500 if you're whittling something out once. You've got to sit there, like we talked about with the, we talked about some of the different guys. If you're going to be dominant in the sport, you've got to be able to repeat it over and over again. And that's one of the things that Leo brought to him. You can see, look what he did with the Studebaker over here.
This is a 1952 V8 Studebaker that he worked with Agajanian. In 52, he spent $250,000 to develop this engine. And it's a 4-valve per cylinder, Hemi head Studebaker. What happened, we believe, it never ran at the track because with mechanical injection, a lot of times you'll have some fuel that'll leak down in there, and sometimes they kick back, and the front of the snout was just welded on for the starter, and it kicked back and broke the starter snout, so they couldn't start it.
Couldn't get it started. But so much of this stuff evolved from the early stuff that Miller did. And then it was a progression, and the different displacements for different things. The Offie really became an outstanding midget engine for a long time.
Oh, it dominated.
And, yeah, exactly. And then besides Indy, so there were a lot of, and then there were marine options. They did inline 8s, I believe. There was all kinds of optional types of designs that they did.
Let's step outside here and look at a Miller conversion that ran up until 52. On the fair circuit that was converted for a sprint car, and it's actually a documented 1934 Indy 500 winner.
Wow.
Car was built in 37 by Pop Dreyer, and it's got a 151 Miller Marine engine that was increased to 220 inches, but that is an engine that won the Indianapolis 500, I believe it was 34.
And you think of Indianapolis as being traditional, but the rules were changing constantly. Displacements came up and down. For a while, they wanted to use stock block engines, and then so the fact that the Offie has survived through all those different iterations is just amazing. And the turbocharger really was the saving grace for the Offie in the 60s.
As soon as it started to get a little bit long in the tooth from my airflow, then all of a sudden the strength of it made it outstanding when they
yes.
put the boost in.
Put the boost in. That was a lot of boost.
Yes.
60, 70 pounds.
Exactly. All the boost. How much boost?
All of it.
Throw it all in there.
We need a bigger turbo.
And I mean, when you go over here and you start looking at the IndyCar stuff, you can see that the turbos got bigger and bigger and bigger until Indy finally said, okay,
Yeah.
guys, that's all the turbo you
Right.
get. Then they made a more and more boost. And it's like, okay, well, this is all the boost you get. You know,
Yeah.
so it was,
We get a pop-off valve coming in,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
they figured out how to adjust them. So after tech,
Yep.
And then it all evolved from the original Miller engine design, which originated from a Peugeot engine that one of the racers brought to him that was blown up and said, "Can you fix this thing for me?" And he looked at it and said, "Well, not only can I fix it, I can make this better." That was really where the Miller four-cylinder came from.
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Need to wrap up.
Okay.
So about Goossen, right? So you're on there on that Miller, so Goossen. Probably
Hey,
I'd say the
Kim-
strength. Right? They said the strength of the Offenhauser was the fact that
Well, you know, there's
a businessman and salesman.
yeah, there's an interesting
One
kind.
thing on this,
Straight,
like
right?
look at the Studebaker over here. While if we close out with the Studebaker,
Yeah.
you know, because you start looking at, you know, the strength. You know, the first was. So if you really think about it, you know, like we talked about, the Offenhauser, its strength early on was airflow. As the airflow technology kind of got a little bit older, then the strength of it was its strength. And then you come
Because they
back-
start spinning it faster.
Because they start spinning it faster, they start
Right.
putting more boost to it. Then you come back to here and you can see that Miller-Goossen was figuring out, okay, now we got to go back to more airflow again. And you start looking at this and you look down this intake port.
Straight path.
And you can see,
Yeah.
you can see both the intake valves down in here. And this port is just not that different from what you would see in today's Formula One engine. So you've gone from something that was just a tweak to something here that was, even though it never won an Indy 500, even though it was never the hot ticket, this is where
This is the
everything was
future.
going.
This is future.
You know, for 20, 40, 50
Yeah.
years later, this will be the future. So, you know, we owe so much to Miller-Goossen and what he did. He set a foundation. He took these heroes of ours and made them better they could ever be without him. And he laid out a trajectory for where we were going.
And if you think about it, it's interesting because it wasn't just one man. So it was Miller that started the whole thing, and he had a vision, but then Goossen was the one that made it work. And you know, from a design standpoint, and then it was the triumvirate of Offenhauser to say, I can build it for
Yeah,
you.
no,
and with
financially,
one, like a
and make it
three-legged
work.
stool, if you take one leg away, it doesn't work.
Right.
And so it was the beauty of that, really that triumvirate that really made it work.
And that's so much of what the story here is, not only at the Museum of American Speed, but what we're trying to do through the whole Engine Builder Hall of Fame, is to show these great stories of where these guys came from, where they were going, how they influenced one another, what they did to make this sport something that we love today.
Yeah.
So we're proud to be affiliated with it. It's great to tell the story here at the Museum of American Speed. Yeah, before we leave the Miller room, let's make a shout out to Bill Smith. You know, what Speedy Bill meant to this and his family doing this for us.
Well, I've worked for Speedy Bill since '82, and he was collecting stuff at that time. And actually, we always accused him of not being a collector, but then they came up with the term hoarding.
Yes.
And thank God, because we never did a stock adjustment. We still have original catalogs from the 50s and 60s that were used at the speed shop.
Yeah.
And he had the vision to start gathering these engines and parts and kept them in warehouses until he could...
pure pieces of history. Yeah,
Yes,
pure pieces
yes.
of history that are now almost irreplaceable.
Right, you think about, well, they are irreplaceable.
Yeah.
You think about the Bill and all these guys who kept up with this stuff that just saw that you can never make this again and save this history for us. And now we get to talk about it. Now it's housed here. It's one of the amazing things about this
Yeah.
museum, and getting to be part of this has just been awesome. Thank you for having
You
us.
bet. Thanks
And
for coming by.
And make sure the Smith family knows that we appreciate Speedy Bill, and so thankful that the family has let this just build and grow after him. It's been amazing. This is a blessing.
Yes, it is.